Hello, my name is Dr. Philip Ash. I'm a researcher and a lecturer in the School of Chemistry at the University of Leicester. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today loosely about cars, cows and carbon dioxide. But really what I'm talking to you about is how, as chemists and as humans, we should be taking inspiration from nature, because nature has already solved many of the problems that we're facing today. And nature is a far better chemist than you or I will ever be. One of the problems that we face is one of energy generation and our reliance on fossil fuels. And this is a problem because of the emissions that we create and the pollution, particularly from carbon dioxide, that we're pumping into the atmosphere, which has a huge effect on global climate change. So, this carbon dioxide is a product of combustion of carbon-based fossil fuels to generate electricity. But we kind of need to burn something. So, is there anything else that we can burn which doesn't have these disastrous sort of environmental consequences? Well, here is a very dramatic representation of two atoms of hydrogen bonded together to form an H2 molecule. So if we burn H2 gas in air and oxygen, we produce water as our only product. The enthalpy of combustion of this reaction is approximately minus 290 kilojoules per mole of hydrogen burned. And so the HH bond contains quite a lot of energy if we can only harness it. In fact, the energy in these H2 molecules is already being harnessed in fuel cells, some of which use hydrogen as a fuel. If we take the schematic here, we pass our hydrogen fuel in on the left. This passes over an electrode called the anode. What happens at the anode is that hydrogen is oxidized. Remember that oxidation is the loss of electrons. So hydrogen is oxidized, gives up electrons to the anode, which leaves behind two H plus ions, two protons, in the electrolyte solution in the middle here. The electrons that are released pass around an external circuit to a second electrode called the cathode. At the cathode, these electrons are given to oxygen molecules from the air. So oxygen is reduced. Remember that reduction is the gain of electrons. Then the oxygen that's reduced combines with the two protons, H plus, in the electrolyte and produces H2O, water, in the exhaust gas. Now, I'm sure that many of you will have done the experiment where you put two different metal electrodes into a potato or a lemon, and you connect up some sort of small device like a clock between those, so you make a potato clock, say. And so in the same way that that process produces a voltage, the chemistry that's going on at the two electrodes in a hydrogen fuel cell generates a voltage which theoretical maximum for a hydrogen fuel cell is 1.23 volts, so this is much like a small battery. So if you have a voltage and current flowing through an external circuit, then we can use these fuel cells to do useful electrical work. Some examples of where this is already used. NASA has been using fuel cells in its space missions for several decades. The 2012 London Olympics introduced a fleet of hydrogen fuel cell powered buses on the streets of London. And there are an increasing number of commercial cars and vans which use hydrogen fuel cell technologies. So hydrogen has great promise as a feedstock fuel for future sustainable energy technologies. In fact, there's a major European project called Hydrogen for Innovative Vehicles, which, because scientists are really cool, has been given the acronym HI5, which aims to promote the introduction of hydrogen as a practical fuel. However, hydrogen is not the perfect solution at present. There are very sort of trivial disadvantages of hydrogen fuel. Like there are relatively few refuelling stations at present throughout the country. More importantly, hydrogen fuel cell technologies have an over-reliance on precious metal catalysts. So things like platinum and palladium that are very scarce and therefore very expensive. And so this isn't a particularly economical technology at the moment. More importantly, hydrogen simply is not a green fuel. Approximately 95% of global hydrogen is produced by steam reforming natural gas, such as methane. So hydrogen is produced from fossil fuels, and byproducts of hydrogen production are things like carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, which are the very emissions we're trying to eliminate. Also, things like carbon monoxide poison platinum catalysts that are used in fuel cells. And so we're generating hydrogen which is slowly poisoning our fuel cell devices. So what's needed then is a method of efficient production of hydrogen from a non-carbon based source using catalysts based around cheap, robust, sustainable materials. And this is a major challenge. If you think back to our initial equation for the combustion of hydrogen to produce water, and remember that quite a lot of sort of chemistry and chemical reactions are reversible, then we can start to think that actually it's possible to take water as a plentiful green non-carbon fuel source and produce our hydrogen directly from water. And in fact this can be done. So if instead of producing energy in our fuel cell, if we take our two electrodes, place them in water and apply a voltage, then we can generate hydrogen and oxygen from water in a process called electrolysis. The problem is that this is a very inefficient process. The voltage that you have to apply in order to get this to happen is far in excess of the energy that you actually get back out of the hydrogen that you've produced. So we need alternative solutions. And this is where we look to cows. Particularly we look to cows' farts. These contain a number of gases: hydrogen, methane, carbon dioxide. It's the hydrogen that really interests me here. Where do these gases come from? Very similar chemistry happens in our intestines as well. So if cows can produce hydrogen, and I can produce hydrogen, and you can produce hydrogen, does this mean that nature kind of already has the answer? Well, yes. Certain bacteria that live in the soil, in peat bogs, in our intestines, they can survive using hydrogen as their only energy source. The question then really is, how do they do this? This is a really inspirational thing to be able to do. And this is really where my research sort of comes in. So, stage one, we have some biologists, say, that take a bit of soil or they look in somebody's intestine using a big microscope. They find the bacteria that are capable of doing this chemistry. Then as chemists, we take an even bigger microscope to look at the components of the bacteria that are actually carrying out this chemistry and try to investigate how they're doing it. The components of the bacteria that are carrying out these reactions, that are producing the hydrogen, are called enzymes. And I've represented them as sort of like Pac-Man on the bottom here, sort of just going about his business, eating water and excreting hydrogen, which is then used by the rest of the cell as a power source. So these enzymes are great, but sort of why are they great? Well, the nature's machines, nature's catalysts, they make important chemical reactions happen really, really quickly and very, very easily under ambient conditions. Compare this to industry, where high temperature, high pressure, expensive catalysts, these are very common. In nature, in our bodies, cheap metals such as iron, room temperature, well, body temperature at least, neutral pHs. So enzymes truly are inspirational catalysts. And if we can understand as chemists how they work, then we can harness some of this chemistry that they're capable of doing to make better energy technologies for the future. So I mentioned that I use a big microscope. This is effectively the big microscope that I use. It's called Diamond Light Source. It's the UK's synchrotron light source. It's located in the countryside in Oxfordshire. It's a very nice place. I've indicated sort of there approximately where my experiments happen, and then in the photo on the bottom right you can see that within this large ring-like building there are a series of cabins that they call hutches, and that's where sort of as chemists and scientists we sit and we do our work. So what this diamond light source is it's a beam of electrons that are accelerated very, very well, about 50% of the speed of light. So fast that they would travel around the world approximately 7.5 times every single second. And these electrons are steered around this big ring. As they're bent around the ring using magnets, they lose energy as light, and we use that light to probe how these enzymes actually work. The specific kind of enzyme that I look at is called a hydrogenase enzyme. ASE, just indicates that this is an enzyme. Hydrogen gives you a clue as to the substrate, the thing that this enzyme eats or produces. And these really are the inspirational catalysts for producing and using hydrogen as a fuel. They're equal to platinum. And so if we can work out as chemists how they function and why they're so efficient, then we really, really have a hope of using water, for example, as an almost perfectly renewable and green, sustainable source for future energy technologies.